Hello, everyone. How are you doing? I hope everybody's enjoying the Future of Education conference and that you're excited to learn some things here. The section that I'm working on here is accessible learning, which is allowing everybody to learn and looking at the ways that people learn in order to make it more excitable and accessible to them. So I just have an alarm going off. First of all, I want to say hello. One of the things that's really exciting about a conference like this is that we're all over the world. So good morning if it's good morning to you, good afternoon if it's the afternoon, and good evening if it's the evening. We have a global audience, and that's a great thing because this demonstrates learning that is available and hopefully learning that's accessible because you can take it on your own. And really, when it comes to learning, when it comes to the future of learning, it's something that I think is really important for us all to focus in on and to really think about different ways that we can help our learners access the learning and do so in a way that helps them learn. So I'm joining you today from Calgary, Alberta in Canada, so just to the east of the Canadian Rocky Mountains, and I'm sure that we have people from all over the world here, and for me, that's a very exciting thing. And I'm going to start with a quote by a Canadian author. If you're familiar with the science fiction writer William Gibson, there's a quote that's attributed to him, and it's, "The future has arrived. It's just not evenly distributed yet." And I think that's a good quote for this conference. I think that's a good quote for education in general. We have the tools, we have the ability to make learning accessible to everyone. We have the ability to use the best research when it comes to learning to make sure that that learning is effective. But the question is, are we using those tools? Are we actually creating learning content that is available and accessible to everyone? So I thought today we would take a little bit of a journey together, and I want to introduce you to a friend, and you may recognize yourself in this friend. This is Holly, and Holly is passionate about things that she loves and to learn. She has she has subject matter expertise in several areas. And what she really wants to be able to accomplish in her career is to be able to help the people that she's teaching and training to develop the passion and the love for the same material that she has. So she wants to really share that knowledge, and she wants to make sure that everybody can enjoy that knowledge. And there is a challenge, though, for her, and that is that she has a lot of diverse learners. She has learners that are across different skill sets. She has learners that maybe need a little bit more help. She has learners that struggle with certain aspects of learning. And in fact, she even has learners that may have certain challenges around hearing or vision or just in the methodologies of learning that she wants to be able to help. So she wants to find a way that she can help everybody in her classroom and in her training sessions learn. Well, fortunately, she has another friend, so I'd like you to meet Edna. And Edna is Holly's guide. Edna has been around, has been teaching and training for a long time, and Edna has a lot of information that she can share with Holly to help Holly become a more effective educator when it comes to accessibility and when it comes to learning. And she's going to share that with Holly, and I'm going to share it with you. So we're going to hopefully, by the end of this presentation, you'll have some actionable steps that you can take to help make your learning more accessible, more available, and really work with the individuals that may need some special assistance, right? Now, the challenge, of course, that Holly has is that she recognizes that there's an entire department in her school that's dedicated to accessibility. And it seems like a daunting thing, like you have to become an expert just in order to do the basics. So she's worried about that. Does she have to become an expert? And if any of you have ever taught in any type of formal education setting, we often get an accessibility letter at the beginning of the semester. I know that in my own career over the past 25 plus years, that seems to be increasing. And I think it's not that we haven't had the need for accessibility in the past. I think what it really boils down to is the fact that people are more aware of challenges that they may have when it comes to learning. And that, as an instructor or a trainer or a teacher, can sometimes feel a little bit intimidating, like somehow you have to become an expert in accessibility just to do your job to share and train people. And that intimidation can sometimes make us feel that, what do we do? What's the next step? And we may wish to lean a lot on the accessibility department if we're in a formal institution. And that's great, though, there is expertise. But a lot of that expertise is going to be more around accessibility in terms of, specific technologies or specific tools to help learners with disabilities that may need to be accounted for. But we can still do stuff in our course design using tools like iSpring that will allow us to actually create effective, accessible learning. And Edna's, you don't have to be an expert. Edna's recognized this. And basically what we can do is we can use iSpring, and I'll show you this, how as a tool to create learning content that is based upon research-based learning and the way people learn. So even just within the tool and with the content that we create with the tool, we're going to increase accessibility. And when it comes to thinking about how people learn, people have different preferences in terms of how they like to learn. And this is one of those slides where we kind of break it down into simplistic terms. We have three sort of levels here. There's certainly a lot more to this, but if we think about visual learners, people that learn better through observed content, things like animations and videos and different diagrams and interactions and such. We might have auditory learners that learn to their content through things like narration or sound. And we might have kinesthetic learners that prefer that hands-on activity, the interactive activities, the ability to move things around and to work. And all of these might be different learning styles, but they also come with some challenges because not everybody is going to be able to use, all of these methodologies all the time. Sometimes what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to account for certain disabilities within the learning environment. So we might have some learners that have low visibility. So in order to serve those learners, we're either going to have to bring in some sort of technology like a larger screen, or we're going to have high contrast screens, or we're going to have to go into another modality of learning. So someone that might have low vision or even blindness might not be able to work, obviously, with the vision learning that we create, the visual learning that we create. They may need to work with more kinesthetic, or they may need to work with more auditory. And then, of course, the opposite applies as well. If we have someone that has auditory challenges, then we may wish to have tools that are more visual. We may want to be able to have some tools that allow them to participate without the need to be able to necessarily hear what's there. They may be able to see what's there. And that's, we may have hearing impairments. We may have people that are not able to hear at all. And actually, we may even have a scenario where we can build good design where it might be a language issue. So someone might not necessarily be hearing impaired or have the hearing loss. What they might have is a situation where they have English as a second language, or they might have whatever language we're teaching in, that might be a second language to them. This is something near and dear to my heart, actually. English is actually my second language. When I was younger, I was born in Canada, and I learned English in school, obviously, but I actually at home learned a different language prior to entering the school system. And so for myself, I would consider myself as someone that needed a little bit more help in terms of being able to understand language, which by using visual learning, that was a way that I compensated for that. And then we have people that are kinesthetic, and this is a big thing. This might be reflected in things like issues around the ability to pay attention. We have to vary the way that we teach. We have to create opportunities for these learners to be able to go out and work with their hands, be able to get up from their desks. And this applies to both in-classroom training as well as the e-learning content that we create. I think that when we look at e-learning versus classroom training, I think the two go together as opposed to being separate. We can do one or the other, but a lot of times we benefit when we do both. So we have these learners that might need a little bit of extra help to succeed. And when we go back and we look at this, it's different tools that we could use, things like assistive technologies, screen readers, audio tools, speech to text. These are all ways or technologies that we can use to increase the accessibility of learning. So when we're looking at tools to create learning content, we want to be able to look at tools that will allow us to incorporate audio, to incorporate speech to text, text to speech, going both directions. We want to also look at tools that allow us to build on concepts of UDL, or universal design for learning. We want to be able to have tools that accommodate flexible teaching practices, where we can have different types of teaching practice, where we can meet the students on their terms, where we can provide alternate ways for students to acquire knowledge, ways that meet their needs, as opposed to one monolithic, we're going to teach this way and you shall learn this way. We can create training and we can create learning content that has a varied approach, so that some learners can choose to learn the material this way and some learners can choose to learn it this way. Now, UDL is a topic unto itself, so there's a lot here in terms of going deeper into any of these topics. And then, of course, accommodations. And I spoke to this a little bit earlier, where I talked about the idea that we really want to be able to accommodate learning, and a lot of times certainly in formal education environments or school systems, we actually have accommodations as a part of our job. So, as I said earlier, quite often I will receive accommodation letters at the beginning of the semester for specific students. And one of the things that I've noticed about the accommodation letters is that if you design good learning, the accommodation is already there. So the idea is we might have to give them more time to complete tasks. We might have to provide alternate formats for the material. We might have to provide material in advance, or we might have to artifact the material by creating learning artifacts that the learner can take with them. And so those accommodations will help people learn better. And then really we also want to have inclusive teaching practices. We want to make sure that we look at the different learning styles, that we understand the different learning styles, and that we accommodate for those within our training in our classrooms. And a long time ago, years ago, I worked in hotels and resorts, and I took a course from AARP, which is the American Association for Retired Persons. And really, this was a course that I took on how to accommodate older people in coming into a hospitality environment. And now it's become more applicable as I've gotten older, but the idea is that back when I was young, I learned how to help old people have a good time at a hotel and a resort. And in that, I learned a principle that I think is very important. And that principle is good design for one person is often good design for many people. And that applies to the training environment as well. If we create good, well-designed, good learning experiences that accommodate maybe someone that requires more visual or more auditory or more kinesthetic learning, all of a sudden my entire class, my entire training environment becomes better because I'm accommodating more people. This actually might even go back to something where a lot of people may be unaware that they have a preferred learning style, or even unaware that they require accommodations to be successful in their learning. But if I design with accommodation in mind, if I design with accessibility in mind, it's not just those that self-identify or are identified as requiring it. Many people will still benefit from having this. So I think that's good. Good design is good design, and I think we should try to build it in all of our learning. Because if we make content that uses research-based learning tools and methodologies, then we're going to get the support for accessibility. We're going to get the support for all students. So what are some of the different types of research-based learning methodologies that we can use in order to create more accessibility and more inclusion and more availability? So there are many tools, there are many different techniques that we can use. So there's things like the Feynman technique, things like Pomodoro techniques. All of these things, briefly speaking, are great ways to help students learn and acquire knowledge. But I just wanted to concentrate on 6 specific ones because these 6 specific ones have a lot of research behind them. They're proven techniques for learning, they're great for studying, and they're things that we can actually implement very easily within iSpring. And I think that's great. I mean, this is the future of education, and we're looking at iSpring as a tool to help us unlock that future of education. And I'm really happy to say that not only do these things have research behind them, but we also have a tool available to us to actually implement them. So we have things like dual encoding. With dual encoding, what we want to do is we want to find distinct ways, different ways to approach the same material. So this ties back to universal design for learning, but dual encoding might be something where if I create an element of learning, if I create a artifact, I create something, let's say I want somebody to be able to learn about the history of wooden ships. I could not only have visual content, but I may also wish to have some auditory content as well. Again, going back into my history, I worked in museums for a while, and when we were in a museum environment, we would not just have images of the ship, say, if we're going to do wooden ships, we wouldn't just have an image, we would actually have audio playing around that to try to create that environment and help people understand. So dual encoding is a proven methodology. We also can have something called elaborate interrogation. And elaborate interrogation sounds quite complex, but actually this is a favorite methodology of 2-year-old children. Elaborate interrogation is asking why, 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 why. So the idea behind this is that I want to be able to have learning material that allows the learner to go deeper into the why behind the learning, so they can ask, why is it that this occurs? Why is it this occurs? So this is where I look at things like branching, and this is where I can look at things like providing depth of experience. I often, everybody often says that we teach to the middle. So if I have a large group of people that I need to train, you sort of look at your average. But how do we allow those that need more help to catch up? And how do we allow those that are more interested to move ahead? And we can do that through the ability of having elaborative interrogation tools that allow branching and the ability to move through the material. And then interleaved practice is yet another tool. With interleaved practice, what we're doing is we're not sticking to just one subject at the same time. Now, this is maybe a bit more of a study technique, but if I have a large amount of material that I need to train people on, what I may wish to do is I might wish to break that subject into compartments and then allow for movement between those compartments so that I'm allowing the learner to not just focus on one thing at a time, but to focus on one thing, then a little bit more of another thing, back and forth, which actually, again, this is all research-based learning methodologies, will both break up the content so anybody maybe with a kinesthetic or attentional issues can switch focus, but can also switch focus in a way that's productive towards learning. We also have metacognitive engagement. With metacognitive engagement, this is thinking about thinking. One of the things I do with my classes every year is I have them do something called a learning journal. And in that learning journal, what I do is I have them reflect back on how they're learning, what it means to learn, what are they thinking about, what are they struggling with. We can also build this into the tools that we use for creating e-learning, again, iSpring, because what we can do is we could create reflection points within the content where after we've taught something, we don't just test the user on what it is that they've just learned, but we ask them to reflect upon what it is that they just learned. So by thinking about how you're thinking about something, you're actually going to deepen the connections and you're going to get better end results in terms of learning. We also have active recall. And with active recall, what we're doing is instead of just consuming content and putting into notes and just assuming it's there, we actually challenge the learner, or we challenge ourselves if we're studying, to recall the information from memory without referencing other materials. The nice thing about having a tool where we can question a learner in, say, an e-learning environment is that we can ask the question, do you remember this? And describe what you remember. And then that gives them the opportunity to pull it from memory as opposed to just retrieving it through a search, or in today's world, just using artificial intelligence to synthesize things. Here, what we can do is have them think about it and retrieve it from their own memory, which helps establish the learning that we're looking for. And then finally, another research-based methodology is spaced repetition. And this is something where I really like using tools that allow me to create content that I can then give to the students on a regular basis. So let's say, for example, I have some sort of learning that I want the student to learn, such as maybe I want them to learn about geography. So what I could do is I could give them a geography lesson, and then I could ask them to do a test on the geography lesson. And then the very next day, I could have them repeat that to see if how much they've remembered. And then I could, at an interval of maybe 7 days from that point, I could then try to have them retrieve again. Then maybe at 14 days, at 29 days, and then at 30 days, I could have a final exam. The idea here is that by introducing spaced repetition, we get better learning. Here, again, we can have an electronic tool, or we can have e-learning tools that will allow us to schedule that spaced repetition, and also we can create once and use many, and that's a very valuable tool as well. So we can see we have a lot of different research-based learning methods. And just as a quick heads up, I guess I should have mentioned this earlier, I'm not able to see any questions in chat. So if the moderator just, you feel free to, say somebody has a question that's burning, but I will allow time at the end of this as well for questions and such. The research into learning is extensive, and this is just some things that are very proven in terms of the research that we can take advantage of when we're building accessible and available learning. So we're back to Holly, and Holly's thinking, okay, Holly's excited about this. She's going to use this research-based learning. She understands what's happening, but, is there any challenge that might occur when we try to implement this research-based learning? Well, it is, right? It seems like it might be hard. It seems like it might be difficult. It seems like it might be time-consuming. Well, obviously, I'm excited because I've discovered, iSpring. And with that tool, I'm finding that I am able to create a lot of research-based learning artifacts that I can then use in my classroom. Now, in my case, I'm in a classroom learning environment, but this, of course, would apply to any type of learning environment, whether it's corporate training, whether it's pure e-learning, whether it's a blended learning classroom with e-learning. There's a lot of possibilities here that are really useful. And so obviously, the concern is there time commitment here? Is there going to be a difficulty commitment here? What are the challenges that I may face? Well, it's not hard at all, right? We have iSpring, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Now, the nice thing is not only do we have the iSpring tool that plugs into PowerPoint and or interfaces with PowerPoint that we're able to use to create the content, but we should also be aware that PowerPoint itself has accessibility features in it as well. So we're able to leverage the best of both worlds, if you would. One of the things that I like to do after I create content using iSpring is I often like to use the PowerPoint accessibility checker. And so I've created content based upon learning design, learning research. And then what I'll do is I'll also use the PowerPoint accessibility checker to go through and make sure I've done things like tagged photos, so that if I'm using a screen reader, it's going to be able to say, this is a photo of Etna, right? So we're able to see this, right? So you can use both. You can leverage both iSpring and PowerPoint's accessibility checker to make sure that you're creating good content. So what are some of the elements of iSpring that will allow me to actually create this content? So when it comes to assistance...
Before you start with the elements, Frank, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just want to say we have about 3 minutes left for the content part of the presentation and maybe 3 full minutes left for the questions and answers. Sorry about that.
Perfect. I should be on track for that. I'll be quite quick here. So assistive technology, iSpring allows us to record audio, record narration, be able to create that audio component. When it comes to UDL, we can create interactions and role plays. We can create screen recordings. When it comes to the accommodations, we have things like going in and creating different types of translations. We can do things like modify the player. We can do things like have self-paced learning by creating an e-learning component. And also we have the ability to have inclusive practices by things like creating characters and role plays and objects and icons and creating some visual appeal. So now Holly's thinking she's going to design for success. She's going to use iSpring. She's going to make sure she uses all this research-based learning. And what I encourage you to do with iSpring is every time you create a course, try to use one of the new research-based learning methodologies. Try to incorporate that into your learning. So to help you with that, obviously they're great. They've got it, right? We're going to make sure that we have all this. So one of the things that and once we get it, you know who benefits? The students. So we're going to benefit our students, we're going to benefit our learners, and that is going to be a very rewarding feeling. Holly's going to get what she wants. She's going to be able to share what she loves with the world, and she's going to be able to do so across the entire spectrum of learners that she might have. Now, I don't have much time, so I knew I wouldn't have a whole lot of time. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to invite you to visit my YouTube channel. I've created a video on every one of these research-based methodologies using iSpring. So if you wanted to see how to incorporate spaced repetition or interleaved practice, there's a video for that, and you can go and check these out. I'll show you exactly in these videos how to use iSpring to accomplish this objective. And there is a PDF of the presentation that'll be sent out. These are all linked, so you can just click on the image and you'll be able to go out and see how I've done that. And maybe put in the comments, right? We can work together and we can help improve this over time. So there's a couple of resources I'll give you. There's a great book, E-Learning and the Science of Instruction. This book, I just added this slide, so I don't have this linked, but this one here is sort of a heavy-duty book. It's very much the research behind it. And then I do have some great books that are less challenging in terms of complexity. Learning How to Learn is a great book for students. Uncommon Sense Teaching is a great book for instructors, teachers, and designers. These talk about the research-based learning methodologies that support accommodation, accessibility, and availability. And of course, I have to promote my learning and technology channel. So that's the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as well.
Right. Thank you very much, Frank. I think that was extremely inspiring and very insightful. And I would like to welcome every of our attendees, who are almost 150 at the moment live, to drop their questions in the chat. But I can but ask one question that might not be the very obvious one. And let me know if I should probably ask somebody else. But, our attendees come from very diverse backgrounds, from Canada to Turkey, from Tunisia to Romania. And you were saying in the very start of your presentation that it is very common that you're receiving some notes and guidelines on accessibility if you're a part of formal education. But I know at the same time that in so many countries, those kind of requirements are not there in place yet. So if our attendees come from different countries where it's not yet even a big agenda on the educational institution level, what would you recommend them to do first in order to start introducing those practices, those standards, and those methodologies to make sure that learning is accessible and universally understandable?
Well, that's a great question. And obviously, I'm very passionate about that. So, doing the right thing when you're told to do the right thing is great. Doing the right thing when you're not told to do the right thing is still the right thing. So even if you come from a place that doesn't have the guidelines, like here in Canada, we have a lot of guidelines in terms of, we accommodate learners, and that's a formal process. Even if it's not a formal process, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the right thing. And the right thing is to make sure that all the content we create keeps in mind every learner. I'm super passionate about this because I absolutely believe that, well, I'm going to get a little bit, airy-fairy here a little bit. I just believe that learning and the ability to help people learn is the greatest gift to humanity that we can do. So that's a little bit, high level, but it's a stewardship. We really have, helping people learn is a gift. We're lucky that we're able to do this. And so even if you don't have formal standards in your country, even if you don't have mandated rules, still build your content as if you did. Build your content imagining someone that needs to do e-learning because they can't get to a school. Imagine yourself providing learning to someone who maybe struggles with attention. Imagine yourself creating learning for somebody that has low vision or maybe can't hear. And so every time you create your learning, create it with those people in mind. And like I said in the presentation, that might seem like a lot of work. That might seem like it's time consuming. But, if you take a look at those 6 videos that I created, you'll see that it just makes for good learning. It just makes for good content, and you can do it quite easily, quickly, and efficiently, right? So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it definitely does. And thank you very much for once again highlighting that it does not take a whole department or a whole ministry to start doing those first steps to make learning more accessible for all sorts of students. It all starts with you. And I guess that might be your heroic learning. So, right. Thank you very much, Frank. I hope to see you again for one other chapter of our activity today.
Yeah, we're doing the AI roundtable. Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you very much at that point of time. I will see you later, Frank. And I do want to thank you for all the knowledge and expertise that you have shared.